The mirror universe is a very interesting concept in Star Trek that makes great use of the notion of alternate or parallel realities, so much so that it practically spawned the idea of evil doppelgangers from another universe. Of course, the mirror universe is merely one of many alternate realities that exist in Star Trek, but it's revisited more than any other and given its own in-universe name that emerged in Star Trek Discovery, taken from the fan term. So I'm going to look at why the mirror universe is so revisited, both from an in-universe standpoint, exploring the lore, and the narrative fascination of it. The existence of alternate realities is a long documented phenomenon in Star Trek, with their creation usually emerging from a change in the timeline, however not always. Star Trek Parallels shows us that free will and choice creates the emergence of other quantum timelines that then coexist, while at other times the prime timeline itself is altered by time travel related changes, such as in yesterday's Enterprise. Honestly, for now, this is besides the point. Beyond identifying how the mirror universe came to exist, with many suspecting that the change occurred during or after the Second World War, with Earth following a more cutthroat series of regimes and authority through fear. The earliest point of divergence we witness is the fact that Zephram Cochrane conducted his warp flight in 2063 and drew the attention of the Vulcans, as in the Prime timeline. However, he identified the aliens as potential conquerors, and so killed the away team, ransacked the Toplana Hath, and studied their databases contained within. This approach was probably a product of the long mistrust and competitive nature of the Terran universe already at play, changing events. For the greater part of things, it seems that only Earth's history has changed, although there are references to bigger alterations beyond the Federation. From Earth, or Terra, the Terran Empire formed with Starfleet as its military, and they began to aggressively spread from Earth, branching out and attaining short-term spoils from others they encountered, rapidly building a powerful cache of technology and forcing others into servitude to make use of their distinctiveness. By the mid-22nd century, the Empire had taken over Vulcan, challenged the Klingon Empire, and was already a force to be reckoned with, although it was plateauing. Which is the problem with their approach. When consolidating power with Terra at the centre, they needed to constantly project power lest they find their grip slipping. In this path, however, we find the chief interest of the mirror universe. Given that so much has already changed, it seems remarkable that there would even be a Zephram Cochrane, a Starfleet, an Enterprise LX-01, let alone mirror universe versions of Jonathan Archer, Hoshi Sato, and T'Pol, and so on. Think about it, despite events unfolding very differently, their existence implies that their parents still managed to meet up and procreate, forming those characters. Then they ended up in positions similar to their Prime Universe counterparts. The odds of that are incredible, and for this reason alone, the mirror universe is considered a point of fascination for Starfleet of the Prime reality. Clearly, there is some bond between the two. People emerge that by all rights should never happen when the timeline diverged so long ago, and not only that, they still managed to move in circles similar to their counterparts? It's insane. Not only that, but the technology developed ends up resembling that of the Prime Universe too, and when things begin to drift too far away, something happens, tying the Mirror and Prime close together again. In fact, when Star Trek Discovery smushed its toys together to embark on a Mirror Universe arc, at least they raised a valid point and picked up on the sheer similarities when it came to individuals. The entire ordeal was classified, as Starfleet had just endured a Klingon war. They did not want people from the Prime Universe ending up hopping realities looking for copies of people they might know or even knew. Also, antagonising the Mirror Universe might draw attacks. Valid concerns. In 2268 of the main reality, the Constitution-class USS Defiant became trapped in interphasic space before falling through the nothingness and emerging back in time in the Mirror Universe. This trove of 23rd century Starfleet technology was a boon to the Terran Empire, which itself was beginning to fracture under its weight, as it had conquered its local territory and was now straining to maintain a grip on rebelling worlds. The Terran Empire claimed that vessel, and managed to reverse engineer the technology, which was a simple feat considering it was basically Terran tech anyway, and ushered in the means for them to continue to force power over their vassals. By the time of the 23rd century, their technology had stagnated once more, with both the Discovery and the Enterprise encountering the Mirror Universe at a similar technological level, despite the 100 years contaminated head start from the USS Defiant. From Kirk's interference with Mirror Spock, the Empire finally embarked on a radically different course, but then it fell to outside powers bent on revenge, and by the time of the Mirror Universe in Deep Space Nine, it had fallen into a very different status quo. But despite this, however, that impossibility of individuals continued on, with a Mirror Sisko, Kira, Bashir, and somehow even a real flesh and blood Vic Fontaine. This only reinforces the interest in the Mirror Universe, and once more, contamination from the Prime Universe leaks in when the plans for the DS9's USS Defiant are stolen and recreated by the Terran Rebellion. The future of the Terran Empire is only alluded to outside of the shows, but I'm curious to see where it ends up, and honestly, I hope that it has followed a darker path because, well, it's more fun to see than if we just got another Mirror Federation. Essentially, no matter how far events begin to drift from the Prime Universe, the Mirror always seems to have people, places, events and technology in common, despite that making no logical sense. By the 32nd century, we learn that on some level the Mirror Universe was too far from the Prime now, and has been since the late 27th century. That was the last reported contact with the Mirror Universe, and what's more, individuals from that reality located in the Prime suffered extensive sickness and fracturing of themselves, as they were too far from their plane of origin. Okay, what this distance is not mentioned, but assumedly the differing realities are in some form of orbit over their millennia, or events in that time are now so different that whatever force was keeping it and the Prime entwined eventually failed. Terran history was eventually well enough understood that it was studied in the Prime timeline, although its reputation remains as a dangerous one. In external media, Starfleet even goes so far as to place operatives and agents in the Mirror Universe to observe and keep tabs on it, just as intelligence does to Romulans or Klingons. In fact, I would assume, considering we learn that there were temporal agents recruited from even the Kelvin timeline, that inevitably Starfleet would form some interdimensional agency exclusively for dealing with any sort of crossing event. So, that explains Starfleet's in-universe fascination with this realm, but what about ours? There are great narrative reasons for visiting the Mirror Universe. The first one, I believe, is simply that it's great fun to see darker versions of characters we know. It's fun to look into the established individual and see how far they can be twisted into something else, where we get to ask all sorts of fun questions. Would our Captain Sisko be a pirate and charismatic raider if he grew up in the Terran universe? Would our Julian Bashir be little more than a thug if he had not been augmented and lived here? Can our Ezri Dax wear more leather? I mean, what? This is why I believe the Mirror Universe arc of Star Trek Discovery was far too soon. We had yet to appreciate the characters that the show had only just introduced and not focused on, so the impact of meeting evil versions of themselves was severely lessened as a viewer because we did not know them anyway. Contrast this to Mirror Mirror, which premiered in Season 2 of the original series, or Crossover in DS9's second season. We got to enjoy the oozing menace and power plays of Intendant Kira as we saw her confronted by our adamant XO that we had grown to understand over the last series and a half. We could appreciate the complete opposites on show. A Kira who had fought her way out of oppression and manipulation, meeting her doppelganger for whom these were the chief tactics to maintain power. In fact, this was one of the main motivations for writer Jerome Bixby when he penned the first script for the original Mirror Mirror, although the original version of the tale was for a less menacing setting, but instead a Federation on the brink of defeat, and one of its earlier terms was going to be the universe of the damned. Which takes me to my second point. It lets us explore some big world-changing concepts without affecting the continuity of the shows or resorting to "and it was all a dream" or one of its many sci-fi variations. In the Mirror universe, we get to explore what the Federation would look like as an evil entity. Then, in later years, we get to see what it would look like if it fell to another oppressive power. Both universe-shattering events to drop into the main series, but not here. We get to see an alternative approach, the road not taken, and that creates more opportunities for tales that might not fit into regular Trek. Starfleet has its darker aspects, but these are usually presented in a way that, even when justified by some greater good, are clearly horrid acts meant to challenge our morality and that of the characters involved. Sometimes the Mirror Universe is portrayed as hostile and an abhorrent place through the lens of characters from our prime reality, and the goal is escape, which is one way to tell a story. But I do enjoy that Enterprise two-parter that was set entirely in the Mirror Universe, where there were not wholly good guys. I don't play Warhammer, but I see the allure of playing in a setting where no one is good and everyone is at some level of evil. Might as well indulge in those stories, and the Mirror Universe provides a similar playground. It was fun to see the scheming, the assassinations, the rising through the ranks, and the fear-motivated accumulation of power. Being the bad guys is fun to play, sometimes. So, both in-universe and from a storytelling standpoint, the Mirror Universe is a very interesting location that I think will be revisited by Star Trek for as long as there is a Star Trek. It's just too rich a playground with too many toys and very little consequence. Even the Kelvin universe has its own mirror, and the books, and Star Trek Online, and a comic line. What do you think? What era of the Mirror Universe would you like to see? I for one want to know their level of involvement in the Temporal War, because I would not be shocked to learn that they wanted in on that mess. Thanks for watching this video exploring the importance of the Mirror Universe. I've been Rick, I promise. And he'll see you again next time. Goodbye.